Welcome back students. Welcome to biology classes. Today we are going to see 10 science biology and we are going to resume the chapter 6, that is life processes. In the previous class we have already seen about the human digestive system, and today we are going to start with the next topic, and that is respiration. So respiration is a metabolic process which involves the breakdown of food to release energy. So whatever food we are intaking, that food is being broken down to release several energy, and this energy is useful for performing several metabolic processes. So that is known as respiration. Now the breakdown of pyruvate into ethanol and carbon dioxide is absence of oxygen, which is known as fermentation. So what exactly fermentation is? That is when the pyruvate is being broken down into ethanol and the carbon dioxide when there is absence of oxygen. At this particular process is known as fermentation. So as this process occurs in the absence of oxygen, it is known as anaerobic respiration. So there are two main types of respiration. The first is aerobic respiration and the second is anaerobic respiration. So whichever respiration which takes place in the absence of the oxygen, that is known as anaerobic respiration, and the processes which takes place in the presence of oxygen, that all the processes are known as aerobic respiration. Now the energy released during the process is being used to synthesize the ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate, right? So whatever energy is released during the respiration process, right, or during the breakdown process, right, so whatever energy is released, this released energy is being used or is being utilized in order to synthesize a specialized form which is known as ATP. So that is also a form of energy only, but whatever the energy which is released from the process or during the process, that is converting itself to a specialized energy which is known as ATP energy, right? And the full form of ATP is adenosine triphosphate, right? Next is, compared to animals, plants used stomata to exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen, and this exchange occurs through diffusion, right? So when we are comparing the animals with the plants do possess the stomata, and this stomata are responsible for exchanging the gases, that is carbon dioxide as well as oxygen, and this exchange of gases which is taking place, this occurs through the process which is known as diffusion. Now it is the diffusion, right? Now we are going to see what exactly diffusion is. So it is a process in living organism involving the production of energy, typically with the intake of oxygen and the release of carbon dioxide from the oxidation of complex organic substances. So here, what exactly respiration, what is the definition of respiration is? So it is a process in living organisms, right? So this process is taking place inside the living organisms, and it is going to involve the production of energy, right? So it is going to produce what? The energy, and that is typically with the intake of oxygen. So the intake, that is inhalation of oxygen is done, and the release out of the carbon dioxide is occurring. So typically the intake of oxygen is seen and the release of carbon dioxide is observed. So that is nothing but the oxidation reduction reactions which are taking place in the organic substances. So two things are mainly occurring here. The first is gaseous exchange, that is intake of oxygen from the atmosphere and release of carbon dioxide. So the first is the gaseous exchange which is taking place. So the word itself says that whatever exchange of gases is taking place, that is intake, or if we are intaking the oxygen inside the body, that is known as intake of oxygen. Whereas when the carbon dioxide is released out in the atmosphere, this all things are coming under the specialized process which is known as gaseous exchange. The second one is breakdown of simple food in order to release energy inside the cellular respiration. See here, the cellular respiration means the respiration which takes place inside the cell. So that particular respiration which occurs inside the cell, that is known as cellular respiration. So the first one was the gaseous exchange, and the second one is telling us about the breakdown of simple food. So whenever the simple food is broken down into the most simpler forms, at this time there will be the release of energy inside the cell, and that particular release of energy inside the cells is known as cellular respiration, right? Now you can see over here, this is the pathway, right? These are three main pathways where the breakdown of glucose is observed. So the glucose, which is the simplest sugar, it is a 6-carbon molecule, and in the this glucose in the cytoplasm gets converted, or it is divided into pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon molecule, right? So the glucose in the cytoplasm is getting converted to pyruvate. Now this pyruvate can occur in 3 ways, right? So the 3 pathways which are running, that is the first, that is in the absence of oxygen. The second is that where there will be a lack of oxygen, and the third, that is when there will be the presence of oxygen, right? So we are going to see the 3 pathway through which the pyruvate is getting converted into different products. The first pathway says about the pyruvate gets converted to ethanol, as well as the release of carbon dioxide is observed, and this whole process occurs in the absence of oxygen, and the example which is seen over here is about the yeast. So the first pathway is taking place in the example if we are seeing, then that is yeast, and there will be the absence of oxygen where the pyruvate is getting converted into ethanol, carbon dioxide, and along with this the energy is being released. Second pathway is when there is lack of oxygen. So there is not enough amount of oxygen which is present, and due to this what is happening, the energy is released. But what is happening here, you can see the example here which is taken, that is the human muscle cells. So when we are talking about when there is lack of oxygen, the pyruvate gets converted into lactic acid and the energy is released. And the third is, that is when there is a presence of oxygen. So here in mitochondria, if we see, then the pyruvate gets converted into the carbon dioxide with the release of water as well as the energy. So these are the 3 pathways which are seen over here, when there is presence of oxygen, when there is absence of oxygen, and when there will be a lack of oxygen. So when this 3 pathway occurs, so in these 3 of the pathway, the energy is released with the production of different types of products. Clear? Now we are going to see about the 2 different types of respiration. We have already seen about the basic, that is what exactly aerobic respiration is, and the second what is anaerobic, right? So when the process occurs in the presence of oxygen, that is known as aerobic respiration, and the anaerobic respiration, it takes place in the absence of oxygen. Now the aerobic respiration occurs in the cytoplasm and mitochondria. So when we are talking about aerobic respiration, this aerobic respiration, it takes place inside the cytoplasm and the mitochondria, whereas the anaerobic respiration, it occurs only in the cytoplasm, right? So this is another difference which is seen. The next is, in aerobic respiration, usually glucose is broken down into carbon dioxide and water. So when there will be the breakdown of the glucose, right, it gets converted into the carbon dioxide as well as water. Whereas in anaerobic respiration, the glucose is broken down into ethanol, or it is ethyl alcohol, right? So that is the whole process which was taking place, and that is the fermentation, right? So the last difference says that aerobic respiration occurs in mammals including the humans. So we are coming under the aerobic respiration, that we do respire in the presence of oxygen, right? So whatever breakdown which is taking place, that all occurs in the presence of oxygen. whereas the anaerobic respiration occurs in yeast. So this is the most important example of anaerobic respiration, right, where some types of bacteria as well as in some plants also this anaerobic respiration takes place, right. So this is the main difference between the two types of respiration, that is aerobic respiration and the second is anaerobic respiration. Now we are going to see the next topic, and that is human respiratory system, right. So human respiratory system, there is the passage of air through the respiratory system. So through the respiratory system, first we will see that what are the organs which are involved inside the respiratory system of humans, right. So starting from the nose, right, so that is known as nasal cavity. After the nasal cavity, there will be a common passage which is known as pharynx. Then there will be presence of a voice box which is known as larynx. After then, up till these three things, it is said to be the upper respiratory tract. After the larynx, whatever is present, that will be coming under the lower respiratory tract. So after the larynx, there will be presence of a tube-like structure which is known as trachea. This trachea is being separated or is being divided further into the primary bronchi. This primary bronchi is present inside the lungs. The lungs are said to be the respiratory organs of the human respiratory system. So these lungs, they are specialized organs which are doing what? The respiration, right? So these are the organs which are involved inside the human respiratory system. Now we are going to see that what exactly. See, this is also the figure which is showing the different parts which are involved in the respiratory system, right. So the first is nasal cavity, right. So there is presence of two nares, right, the two holes through which the inhalation and exhalation is taking place, right. So that is the nostrils, right. So after the nostrils, there is presence of nasal cavity, right. After then, there will be presence of pharynx. After the pharynx, larynx is there. After the larynx, there will be presence of trachea. Then after the trachea, you can see that purple colored in the figure. Those two organs are said to be lungs, right? And this lungs, they are having the bronchus, right? And they are divided further to form the particular alveolar sac. And this alveolar sac contains the alveoli, which is useful for trapping the air and the diffusion which is taking place, right. So now we are going to see, okay, one more thing, there is also presence of diaphragm. You can see at the down of the lungs, there is presence of a diaphragm which is red in color, right, and this diaphragm is getting changed in the position when the inspiration or the inhalation and exhalation is taking place, right. Now we are going to see the mechanism of breathing. So first we will see about the inhalation. As you can see over here, in inhalation, right, the intercostal muscle are relaxed, right. So for this reason you need to know that what exactly the intercostal muscle is. So the intercostal muscle is the muscles which are present in between the ribs, right. So the ribs which are present, so the lungs, they are being covered by a rib cage, and there are muscles which are present inside in between these ribs, that is known as intercostal muscles, right. So when the inhalation is occurred, at this moment the oxygen rich air is being entered inside the lungs, and due to this the intercostal muscles get relaxed, and upon the relaxation of that, the external intercostal muscle gets contracted. So internally the muscles get relaxed, but externally the muscles get contracted. After then, the rib cage moves upwards and downwards, right. Why it is moving upwards and downwards? Because when the air is being filled inside the lung, the volume of the lung gets increased, right. And when the volume of the lungs get increased, due to this the diaphragm is getting flattened, right. So as due to the pressure which is being exerted on the diaphragm due to the insertion of the air inside the lungs, so the lungs are going to be increased in size, and when the increase in the size takes place, the diaphragm is getting pressurized and it becomes flattened, right? Then the volume of thorax cavity increases. The volume of thorax cavity that is there when there is presence of lungs. So the lungs is said to be the thoracic cavity or thorax cavity. So when the air is being pulled inside, or when the air is being uptaken, at this time what happens is the thorax cavity or the size of the lungs increases and the pressure in the alveoli decrease. Why the pressure in the alveoli decrease? Because all the air is being filled inside the alveoli, and for this reason, once the air reaches to all the alveoli, the pressure on the alveoli gets decreased, right? And for this reason, when the alveoli pressure is decreased, this is responsible for the air to pass inside it. So air moves in. So this is the whole procedure, that what exactly happens inside the inhalation, right? So in inhalation, when the air is inhaled, at that time the internal intercostal muscle gets relaxed, whereas the external intercostal muscles get contracted. And due to this, what happens when the air is intaken inside, at this time the rib cage is moving upward and downwards, because the air is being filled inside the lungs. And for this reason, when the air enters inside the lungs, for this reason the size of the lungs increases. When the volume of the thorax cavity or the lungs gets increased, the pressure in the alveoli gets decreased, and due to this, what happens, the air can easily pass inside the alveoli, right? So this is the process, that is inhalation. So that is uptaking of oxygen. Now we are going to see about the second, that is exhalation, right? So exhalation, that is the release out of the carbon dioxide, right? So now we are going to see about the second, that is exhalation. And this exhalation is occurring when the carbon dioxide from your body is releasing outside, right? Or it is released outside. So here, now the internal intercostal muscles, which was relaxed in the inhalation time, here it gets contracted. So here it becomes opposite to the inhalation, right? And the external intercostal muscles get relaxed, which was being contracted when the inhalation was taking place. Here the rib cage moves downwards and inwards, right? And for this reason, the diaphragm is relaxed. So the diaphragm, which was being pressurized when the inhalation was taking place, so when you are intaking the air, at that time the diaphragm is facing the pressure on it, because the lungs size is increased, or the volume of the lung gets increased. But here now there will be the release out of the carbon dioxide. So here what is happening, the diaphragm, it comes back to its normal position by relaxing itself. So here in exhalation, the diaphragm gets relaxed, and due to this, here the air is coming outside, right? And for this reason, the volume of the lungs or thorax cavity decreases, right? And for this reason, the pressure in the alveoli increases, because it has to release out the air from it. And for this reason, there will be the pressure which will be increased inside the alveoli in order to remove or move out the air. And this way the exhalation takes place, right? Now you can see over here, this is the flow chart which is showing the exchange of gases between alveolus, blood and tissues. Now see, the blood is the major component which is responsible for transporting the oxygen, because the blood is having a specialized pigment which is known as hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin is having the ability to do the transport of the oxygen, right? So for transporting the oxygen, it needs the hemoglobin, right? So for the exchange of gases, right, we need the blood as well as tissues as well as the alveoli. So now we are going to see that how the exchange of the gases occurs between the alveolus, that is the alveoli, then the blood and the tissues. Okay, so first of all, the oxygen rich air from the environment, and with the help of the nasal cavities it enters inside the pharynx. From the pharynx region it enters into the trachea. After the trachea, it with the help of the bronchi it reaches to the different lung, that is on the right lung, in the right lung as well as in the left lung, right? So now this bronchi is further divided to form the bronchioles, and these bronchioles they form the alveoli, right? And this alveoli, the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange occurs at the alveoli. So in the alveoli the exchange of the gases is taking place. So now whatever air you have intaken inside, that is oxygen rich air, that is it is containing major amount of oxygen, but your lungs will be having carbon dioxide. So here there will be exchange which will be taking place, that your lungs, that is the alveoli, is going to, that is the blood which is being passed over there, it is going to contain what? The carbon dioxide, right? But here from the, whatever air you have intaken, it is containing oxygen. So oxygen from the air which you have inhaled, it passes to the blood, and the carbon dioxide from the blood, it is being transported into the lungs. So this way the exchange is taking place. Again the bronchioles and the bronchi, right? Again what happens is now the exhalation part is occurring, right? So now the blood is having the oxygen, whereas the lungs is having the carbon dioxide, right? So now the carbon dioxide is passing through the bronchioles. So from the alveoli it is passing to bronchioles, then bronchi, then it reaches to the trachea, again to the pharynx, then the nasal cavities. With the help of the nasal cavities, the carbon dioxide is released out in the environment. So this is the exchange of gases which is taking place between the alveoli, blood as well as tissues, right? See, here we are going to see about the terrestrial organism, that is the terrestrial organism uses the atmospheric oxygen. So the terrestrial organisms, that is those organisms which lives on land, right? So we are also coming under them only, right? So we are also a kind of terrestrial organism, right? So we use atmospheric. So atmospheric oxygen means the oxygen from the atmosphere, right? So we are needing oxygen, or we are needing the atmospheric oxygen for carrying out in the respiration. Whereas the aquatic organism, they use the oxygen dissolved in water. So they use dissolved oxygen which is present inside the water. And the plants, how they do respiration. So respiration in plants is very simpler than the respiration in animals. So plants, the respiration which is taking place inside the plants is comparatively very easier than the animals, right? The gaseous exchange occurs through three things, right? The first is the stomata in leaves, which we have already covered in the photosynthesis. The second is lenticels in stem. So there is small hole-like structures which are present inside the stem of the plant, which are known as lenticels, and these lenticels which are present inside the stems, they are responsible for doing the exchange of gases. And along with this, there will be several general surface of the roots which are also going to do the exchange of gases. So these are the three things through which the gaseous exchange in plants take place. Clear? So here we complete this topic of respiration. So today we have seen about the respiration definition, what exactly respiration is, what are the two types of respiration, that is anaerobic as well as aerobic respiration. Then we saw about the human respiratory system, right? That we saw about the two mechanism of respiration, that is we saw two things, the inhalation part as well as the exhalation part, right? And after then we saw that how the exchange of gases takes place, right? That how the intake is occurred, how the gaseous exchange is occurring, and how the carbon dioxide is released outside the body. Then we saw that which type of organism perform, how they are intaking the oxygen in which form, right? So based upon the type of the organism, right, they have several different processes through which the respiration takes place, right? So here we complete this topic. I hope you are very clear with today's topic, and I hope to see you again. Thank you.